Alright, so Cowboy Bebop was an anime that was basically right around musical metaphors, but at the same time, though, there was like something striking about it when you watched it from start to finish because the whole thing made sense, and it's how you should like really view life as a, you know, like what it's all about in the world of like Spike Spiegel and him joining the I forget what group it was, but like them fighting a bunch of terrorists and all that. And it's also really interesting because Yoko Kanno, the same woman that did the music for Ghost in the Shell, also did the music for Cowboy Bebop. So here's 10 things you probably didn't know about Cowboy Bebop, hopefully. Okay, so here's something you probably didn't know about Spike Spiegel, the main character of you know, Cowboy Bebop. Originally, he was supposed to have an eye patch in his original concept art. However, though, the producers actually vowed against it because they thought it would be harder for some of the later themes to make a lot more sense, and it wouldn't be taken as seriously. Because usually, like, there's a stereotype where you see someone with an eye patch and you think like when they're trying to be serious about something, they just try to pretend that that doesn't exist just to show you how much of a man they are, you know. So they kind of thought it was like stereotypical with some of the themes they were going for. Cowboy Bebop was also inspired by Lupin the Third. I always forget how to spell it. I think it's Lupin, Lupin the Third. Yeah. So Lupin the Third is the one that inspired Cowboy Bebop to the point where it was all about like, you know, adventure, but at the same time though trying to figure out like the meaning of life, you know. And you can kind of see like, and here's another one that's interesting, like the same guy who made Cowboy Bebop also made Space Dandy, which, you know, if you've watched that one, you can kind of see like why they adventure off into like outer space and all that, and go to it's like space colony, but like, you know, then they start going to other planets and stuff and time traveling, like kind of like inspired by like, you know, like Star Trek and all that, because people in Japan that write a lot of science fictions were heavily inspired by like Star Trek, and this is right around the time when like, you know, Star Wars and Star Trek had been doing what they were doing, and so you kind of see like a lot of animes that were Japan was like jumping in on it as well. So when Cowboy Bebop was being illustrated, or not just illustrated but directed by Wannabe, the guy who this was basically his first solo project as a solo director. So like he had full control over his whole division team and all that. And I mean, being a director is not easy, but you know, he basically stated that he wanted to treat it like a miniature movie series, and hence that's why, you know, they created what they did with it, and then it would just pick off right where it left off in the next episode. You know, like for example, like any other anime that has like almost nearly 1,000 episodes, you know, they leave it at a certain plot, and then that just picks off right where it left off. You know, like Dragon Ball Z, Bleach, One Piece. They all did this, you know, over the years. That was their idea. They would take a situation, talk about it for a while in great detail, and then they'd move on to the next one, and then they do it all over again. It was something that just worked over the years. And here's another one that's really interesting. Cowboy Bebop also brought in, like, even in the mid 2000s, like 2000, so like 20 years ago, right around that time, it's possible that not only did Cowboy Bebop as a series bring more Western viewers into Japanese anime, but it also inspired a lot of Western animes out in the, like, American Western animes as well. I'd have to find some examples, but it's basically, you know, Cowboy Bebop has such a huge fan base, even to this day, that there's people that have been able to see things in like a new light, rather, you know. So think of it like that. It inspired stuff, but at the same time, it kind of changed a lot of stuff as well that maybe to this day we don't even realize yet, you know, until you really dig into it. Like I mean, like I'll give an example. Like I said the other day with like Ghost in the Shell, if you watch that one. I didn't know that Ghost in the Shell actually was inspired by Blade Runner. You know, if you don't know, the original Blade Runner was a movie that came out in 1982, and Ghost in the Shell didn't start until like 1989. So 7 years later, the manga is getting written. Then they eventually turned it into a Japanese anime, and the first Japanese anime was Japanese only, but then they started re-releasing it. Then the different arcs came out, and then the first one that I remember like you had Ghost in the Shell, and then you had Standalone Complex, like season 2, right around that arc, and then there were a couple other ones. But it's interesting how like one thing influences another. If you really like, you just watching movies and all of a sudden, wait a minute, this looks familiar, and sure enough, it is. Here's one you probably didn't know. So, right around the time when Cowboy Bebop came out in Japan, and mind you, because it's a Japanese anime, it aired first in Japan. It's one of those animes. When Cowboy Bebop first aired, like the very first episodes, some of the episodes before they were moved to a later network, because it had like a 6 p.m. Right around that time in Japan's time, they actually couldn't air certain episodes at the time because of how graphic they were, even by Japan standards. So they were trying to figure out how they could get around it, and eventually, like certain broadcasts, they could only air some episodes. But although all the episodes were done at that point, up until, so basically they had no choice but to re-air them like on another network, and I think it was Wow Wow, so WOWOW. And so it's really interesting to see, even people in Japan were jumping through hoops just to be able to see the whole thing. So the guy who created Victor and Valentino, if you're somebody who's ever watched that show on Cartoon Network nowadays, he was actually, believe it or not, a huge fan of Cowboy Bebop back in the day. And they stated in a 2019 interview with him that, back in his high school days, he used to obsess over Cowboy Bebop to the point where, it kind of got him into wanting to direct like his own animations, but like, or cartoons or animations, if you want to get into that argument. And it's just interesting to think that he said if it wouldn't have been for like Japanese anime in a lot of cases that, he was into, might not have inspired his career. And therefore, like, even though Victor and Valentino isn't necessarily like it's not the same genre as Cowboy Bebop, but it's interesting to think though that he never would have got that job, therefore that show never would have existed. One man's legacy inspires another man's legacy, and even if they have nothing to do with each other at first, and you really see how that, how inspiration really is strong enough to inspire people, and we don't even realize it. So when Cowboy Bebop was being made, and they ended it and they aired it, and everybody else wanted more Cowboy Bebop, the director actually declined and said that he thinks it's better that they end it where it's at, quit while they were ahead, because that way it wouldn't ruin the originality of what made it so great to begin with. Because they ended it in such a great spot, what else could they expand upon other than, because if you don't know, and I mean, let's have a conversation about this if you really want to. Spike Spiegel, some people have debated that, is he really alive or is he dead? And honestly, I think he's dead, because there's more evidence to believe that, I mean, if you pay really close attention to like how all the episodes are aired and how they work, you realize that they were all musical metaphors. As soon as you see the very last episode, Spike goes off talking about how, life is just, not just a dream, but it's all just a, like we're trying to, like a test rather, not like trying to get into religion or anything, but, but it seems like people ask that question all the time, like, what is the meaning of life? Me personally, I think it's progress. You become somebody, and then, what happens after you die? You like go into like another form. Like how does that work? We don't know. Some people speculate we maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe this is all there is. Plus whatever else is out there in the universe that we don't see. But others speculate otherwise. So basically, in Cowboy Bebop, what ends up happening is Spike Spiegel ends up dying in the end. And then as soon as the ending credits start to play, you hear a song by Yoko Kanno, the same woman that did the music compilations for Cowboy Bebop and Ghost in the Shell, and she's done other things too. But she has a band called Seatbelts, and the song is called Blue, the ending theme song. And basically, it talks about how like he's ascending into the afterlife, and they show Spike, like they zoom out, and then then you see a bunch of birds fly, and then eventually you start seeing like it ascend into the sky and into the universe once it breaks the Earth's atmosphere. And so they talk about how now he's free, and he doesn't have to bear that weight anymore. He doesn't have to carry that weight, like all the stuff that was holding him back in his past. And even to this day, he's free to the point where now he can just move on and be done with it, you know, because in that life it doesn't even matter anymore, because now he's in a different one. So basically Spike Spiegel is dead at that point. You know, some people don't know that. I think some people even refuse to believe that, but you know, that's how well written it was. You know, it made you think twice about it, and you really you wanted to figure it out at some point, you know, because that's what really made Cowboy Bebop. And if you really think about it, that's what makes a great anime. You know, trying to get your audience involved to the point where they want to figure it out. You know, what inspired such a masterpiece? What gave people that inspiration, you know, to want to, you know, put that much time and effort into it, you know? So really, if you think about it, the ending is probably one of the better ways to end it, because, you know, that was the metaphor they were going for from the very beginning, the lesson to carry on your way, and that's like perfect right there to end it, you know. Now he doesn't have to worry about it anymore because it's all over, you know, at least in that lifetime. And then what problems would he encounter in the next life, if there is one, you know? And that's what I'm thinking about in real life, because it's like we think about what life is and we don't know. We really don't. And then, you know, when you learn all these things that are out there, especially things that are beyond this planet, you know, it really makes you think. Because, see, that's what also made Cowboy Bebop so great. It wasn't just a fantasy that somebody made. It actually had a lot of realism to it that would make you think otherwise. What is really life about? And what is progress? What is meaning, you know? It begs an answer, but that's what made it so great, though, and that's why they probably refused to make another Cowboy Bebop, because there's no reason to add it after that. When Cowboy Bebop first aired, it won a reward for like one of the greatest animes that had ever aired, like within the first year that it was first aired, and that is like something that a lot of things don't usually happen right away, because what happens is it's good reputation, because I mean, and rightfully so, Cowboy Bebop's a series that's aged over the years, but I mean, most series that have won like Oscars or rewards or whatever, you know, different awards in Japan, because I don't know everything in Japanese off the top of my head, but that is very interesting, even for even for Japanese animations, where it seems like they're all over the place with what they're capable of coming out with. And Cowboy Bebop, while it was running, it didn't have that many episodes compared to like Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that. I mean, and it didn't have to. It was, you know, it ran its course, and it built up its own fan base, and it was unique in its own way. So over the years, it eventually ran, like, I'm trying to think how many rewards it won, but it was fast growing when it first came out, and the first year it came out, a lot of the rewards that it had won were significant to the genre that it represented, not just the fans, but the music and the references and some of the famous people around the world that, you know, I didn't even know even watched Japanese anime were giving it a thumbs up. One of the greatest things they've ever seen. So Wannabe, the director of you know, Cowboy Bebop, when he was directing all this at the time, it's ironic because at the time they were inspired by a lot of science fiction too to write Cowboy Bebop, as well as like jazz and rock and roll and stuff like that, like the name of the episodes. But here's something really interesting. They knew where to draw their inspiration from and when to stop what. So like, for example, like a lot of certain things in Cowboy Bebop was inspired by like Star Trek, for example. However, though, like up until a certain point, like near the ending, they wanted it not to do like what Star Trek did, you know, so they kind of try to create their own version of it. And not only that, they just thought they would drag on forever, where it would just keep going, because, you know, space is all about exploration. So they decided to cut it off up until a certain point, so that way they'd end it at a certain point. And so, you know, basically Star Trek also stated that, life was a journey and not a destination. And Cowboy Bebop was going for the whole. They thought it would be more difficult to kind of like explain like some of the themes they were trying to get at if they didn't, cut that off up until a certain point. And outside of Japan or Asia, that wasn't airing Cowboy Bebop at the time. The first country that technically did air it that wasn't in Asia was Italy. So believe it or not, it wasn't just the United States, but it was all around the world that other countries watch anime as well. Even though that should be obvious, but it's interesting to think how they got their hands on the license before everybody else. But I guess they kind of were closer to the animators, so they sort of knew like how to get it first. And Italy wanted to really see it because they were seeing it like from the very beginning, what they were capable of doing with the results. So they were at the right place at the right time, rather. Alright, so that was Cowboy Bebop. If you learned something, I hope you did. I know I did. So, again, if you like this video, comment, rate, subscribe. If you have any requests, let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you want to see more. And if you want to, support me on Patreon, you can. You don't have to if you don't want to. But yeah, have a nice day, everybody. And I'll see you in the next episode. Later.